took it correctly, as sort of missing international community or like the ambiguity of the international community. And I was wondering about, we're talking a lot about the nationalistic interest and the conflict of global interests versus nationalistic interests, and how, in if in fact Africa is on the lower end of the foreign policy agenda, and we see all these nationalistic interests coming to the forefront of this issue, how do we create a society or an international community, so to speak, that will embrace these global interests when you have all these disparities, and and as you say, there's not this unanimity. How do we create the situation where our moral values, as Mrs. Smith talks about, come into play, and how do we frame this within the larger geopolitical project?
Well, regarding moral values, well, that's a very different, a very, very difficult question, moral values. But I can only say that Africans have to clean their house first. We have to put a house in order. And I think the way it is being tackled through NEPAD, if you have been following of late after African Union became African Union, and you see a number of issues taking place, I think African is trying to, I think the issue of, say, Africa solving its own problem, maybe it is overblown. I think it is trying to say we are trying to get the capacity to solve our own problems within our house, because we know it is not yet that there is this global interest. So we have to strengthen ourselves by, I don't know whether I'm answering.
Right. But I mean, in terms of that, where the national interest, like in the case of the Nigerian, comes into the global interest, like how do we create a situation where that's part of the political realm, the geopolitical. So how do we create a situation where the national interest is somehow linked with the global interest? We talk about Africa creating African solutions, but then at the same time, this is an urgent situation that needs, immediate action. So
I agree with you, and that's why I'm saying it's still very difficult. People have got different views about this, but if you had Gail Smith say, African Union would say, look, forget about the issue of sovereignty. It's coming. That's one way of trying to reach there. We are talking about solving problems. By the way, if you look at ECOWAS has done a lot in solving some of the local problems. And I'm telling you, the situation in Congo, if it was not for the intervention of the Saka process, Pretoria Agreement, Nelson Mandela, look at the Burundi, for example. The African Union is trying to come up, but it's not there. So it may take a while, but you can see a process. There is a shift, a fundamental shift from how it was during OAU and where it is now. And I agree with you, there is still a problem. Some countries, even within Africa, will start looking at their own self. That's I think it's a human problem. So we are still looking at that. But you can see also other moves to say, look, let's look at this issue of sovereignty. Are we going to allow one of us to keep its own people inside the boundaries and keep this on ourselves? So there is a move, but it's not as fast as you and me would have wanted. But it is there. And unless we in Africa really think about it seriously, I'm sure this is 2005, 2010, something will have come. But I think there is a move, a very fundamental move toward that one. Unfortunately, we have casualties along the way.
Kind of following up on that, there seems to be a very strong contrast between the global response to the tsunami in Southeast Asia and this. And I want to get kind of your opinion on what you felt was the main reason, what's the main difference. Just that it's a lot simpler, it's a lot more cut and dry to respond to the tsunami, just donate money. There's death, it's not as complex as it just that there's not enough media coverage. Like, what do you think the primary difference is? Why people are
Well, one of the answers certainly is media coverage. As Gail suggested, there's a lot more of it than there used to be, but while there has been some fine reportage out of Darfur, the regime is actually clamping down very, very hard on access for reporters into the Darfur region. I talk to reporters all the time who want to go and want my advice and want to know about visas, travel permits, daily travel permits, all of which are required to do anything. It's exceedingly difficult. I think actually that is in the process of changing right now, but I think you're asking the right question. How can it be that this hyper telegenic tsunami phenomenon gets so much attention and so much money so quickly, whereas Darfur struggles largely because what is there to be seen is not seen. There were some wonderful photos on the cover of Time magazine by James Nockway a while back, but we just, and I'm not sure why we don't have better video coverage or still photography, but I think that is unfortunately, we don't have anything the equivalent of a tsunami wave running right up a road that's captured on video, although I would argue that what's there to be seen is much, much more compelling, if not so telegenic.
Can I just make it more complicated for you, but just and harder, because I think this is something that's going to get worse over time. Not only did we have video footage of the tsunami, but it was wildly dramatic and in real time. And if you think about what the media focuses on, it's sensational events, because that's what sells and causes people to turn on their televisions, which makes it appealing to people who advertise, who are actually the same people who own the media. So I think part of the problem we've got, and it's an acute problem, because there is less coverage of Africa today. It's reducing rather than expanding in the U.S. Media bureaus are closing bureaus in Africa, sending fewer, less experienced correspondents to cover Africa. Because what they're looking at is the bottom line on financing. And if you look at media consolidation, if you look at who owns our media, it's something that's, I fear, going to get worse. And it's not as though you don't have plenty to do, but it is worth, when you see something in the newspaper or on television about Sudan or about another issue you care about, to write a letter, make a phone call to their 1-800 number and say, keep it coming, we want to see more. Because otherwise it's just going to continue to shrink. And I'm really fearful. I mean, that tsunami wouldn't have been on if nobody had really good footage of a resort hotel with a bunch of tourists in it being wiped out. It was extraordinary to watch. I watched it. But it was the sensationalism and the fact that none of that was professional news footage. That was tourists that caught it. So when you see the good pieces,
But let me also add that it's also a question, a perception of problem.